All right, so I wanted to do a predictions video for next year. First things first, if you get value out of this video, please like, subscribe, comment, all that good stuff. So first things first here, I'm predicting the S&P is going to be up 0 to 10%. I'm not giving exact predictions because obviously I think that's kind of useless and pointless. I think it's going to be a very modest up year. And then I also have in there a 10 to 20% pullback. I'm saying Q2 or Q3. And the reason for that is in the near term, I don't expect any major, a little volatility definitely is in order, but any major volatility, I don't expect that. But we are well overdue for a decent sized pullback. So I think that will happen. Bitcoin, I'm predicting 250,000 plus more institutional adoption. I think we could see, we will see more publicly traded companies start to buy. I mean, BlackRock's already recommending a 2% allocation, but I think stuff like that's going to pick up. And then on top of that, as far as Bitcoin goes, I think it's really, really hard to predict Bitcoin. Like, it's hard enough to predict stocks. Bitcoin's even harder because obviously it's more volatile. The best case scenario for Bitcoin is we could get like a major, like an Apple, or maybe, Tesla's probably more realistic because they already own Bitcoin, but a major, we're talking a top, 10 or 20 company in the world adopt Bitcoin. That's something that could very well happen. We get the strategic Bitcoin reserve, like stuff like that. That is the best case scenario. So best case scenario, honestly, I'm saying 1 million, because if we get the strategic reserve, if institutional adoption picks up, I don't see why 1 million is out of the realm of possibilities. Obviously, that's 4 times more than I'm predicting, and about 10 times more than we're currently at. But again, we've never had a country, at least a larger country, adopt. And I mean, 1 million coins. I mean, the proposal, I believe, is to buy 200,000 a year for 4 years, or maybe it's 5 years. Either way, if the U.S. announces a strategic reserve, there's no way that other countries don't do the same thing. And this is the thing when it comes to Bitcoin. It's like, once that dam breaks, then things will just pour into it. I think it also depends on these new ETFs. We have Strive, who's applying for the bond ETF, the Bitcoin bond ETF. And then we have, I think it's Bitwise that's applying for the ETF to hold companies that have exposure to Bitcoin. If those go through and we get more of those, again, that will contribute, I think, a lot to the upside. Now, for all we know, none of that happens. There's no strategic reserve. These ETFs don't get approved. There's no more institutional adoption. And we get a recession. That probably would mean we're close to the top for Bitcoin. So honestly, my worst case scenario, I would say, would be maybe like 150. That'd be my worst case. My best case is about $1 million. In between that, we're looking at maybe 250, 300. That's my base case. So I am trying to be conservative, but you have to keep in mind that 250K is more than 100% from here. As far as rate cuts go, I'm predicting 2 rate cuts. The Fed, obviously, the last meeting, they were fairly hawkish. That scared the market. We haven't had a dot plot. We didn't have a dot plot release the last meeting. So off the top of my head, I'm not sure exactly what the market's pricing in, but obviously they're pricing in less cuts than before. I believe it's 2 to 3 cuts is what the market's pricing in, which is why yields went down, et cetera, et cetera. Or at the very least, the TLT hit basically a 52-week low recently. So that's something to keep in mind. As far as rate cuts go, I think it's kind of tough to predict because they obviously want to cut. Like, they definitely want to cut, in my opinion. The problem is the data, like the inflation data, and the economic data they cherry pick. But at least we know that, is too, inflation's too high and the economic data is too good to predict, like 100, 200 basis points in cuts. Like right now we're looking at maybe 50, maybe 100. But again, it depends entirely on the numbers. If if someone tells me, hey, like we're in the middle of the summer and we're in a recession, well, we're almost certainly getting more than 2 rate cuts. If someone tells me, hey, it's the middle of the summer and inflation's at 4%, we might not get any rate cuts, or maybe just 1. So I think it all depends on that. I lean kind of in the middle, that the numbers aren't showing that the economy's that bad, at least in the States. But on the flip side, I don't think things are that good for the average Joe, like the real world, how people are actually feeling. So I think that's kind of going to conflict, and they're kind of going to end up falling in the middle. So I'd say 50 to 100 basis points of cuts next year probably is the most likely scenario. I think also mega cap will underperform by a little bit. You have to keep it, like everybody's talking about how overpriced a lot of these stocks are, and they are, like based on all data, they are. But you have to keep in mind that there's so many people that every single paycheck or every 2 weeks, every week, every month, whatever the number is, or whatever the timeline is, they simply put a certain amount of money into SPY, into VOO, into the QQQs. And those are all market cap weighted funds, meaning more money is going to be allocated to these really large cap companies. So as far as that goes, I think that they can own, like if the market goes down, they're probably going to lead the market. But if the market goes up, they're probably also going to lead the market. So I think they'll underperform, but just by a little bit, And that's also coinciding with my predictions. The market's just going to be up a little bit. I think the market will be up slightly, and it will be propped up by your smaller large cap names and the mid cap names. Just my prediction. The last thing here, MicroStrategy and MSTY up over 100%. MicroStrategy typically outperforms Bitcoin, so if I'm predicting they're going to be up 100% from here or 150% from here, theoretically MicroStrategy should be up like 200 or 250, 300. Again, I'm trying to be conservative, and a lot of people are going to be like, oh, well, 100% gains, that's conservative. And I mean, if Bitcoin's up over 100%, well, yeah, it is conservative. So this is my largest position by far in my personal. The mock portfolio, it's very small, but personal, it's the vast, like over 50% is MSTR and MSTY for me. I don't know if I've ever actually said that, but just my thoughts there. And the reason behind that is not necessarily that I think that they're going to like guaranteed 100%. My thought process is I think it's overwhelmingly likely, not a guarantee, but it is overwhelmingly likely that Bitcoin is up over the next year or two. And given that, MicroStrategy is going to be up as well. And if they're up, chances are they're going to be up more than, if Bitcoin is up, chances are they're going to be up more than Bitcoin. So that's just my thought process on that. And honestly, too, like MicroStrategy is literally buying Bitcoin every single week right now. Are they going to be able to maintain that? Probably not. But even if they maintain a pace anywhere close to where they're currently at, it's only a matter of time until the amount of Bitcoin they have is comparable to its current NAV. And eventually it's going to be like, hey, we gotta up that. Because they already own, I think they're almost roughly a half a million coins. It's going to be really interesting to see just how many coins can they accumulate. Can they they're for sure going to get to a 500,000, but 750,000, that's realistic. 1 million, that's going to be hard. That's going to be really hard. I think it depends kind of on if there's a strategic reserve that's announced and a bunch of countries start to buy. I think we're going to see a massive price appreciation, which will make it a lot harder for them to get to 1 million. But MicroStrategy is not going to stop. Like it's very clear. They've been very clear on what their plans are, and there's a lot of people that still have not caught on to this yet. Like the vast majority, And the reason is they still they still buy the whole it's a Ponzi scheme, all that FUD. And I mean, if you don't want to buy, if you're too scared, I don't necessarily blame you, because I think there certainly is a lot of risk that comes with it. I just think the reward far outweighs the risk. But if you're not going to buy, don't be one of those people that goes around saying it's a Ponzi scheme or any of that kind of garbage, or they're just, the greater fool theory, whatever garbage people bring up, because that's not what's happening here. Like, anybody who thinks that they're just issuing shares and therefore it's a bad idea, like, those people, they don't know what they're talking about. Because they're not just issuing shares, they're issuing convertible bonds, which are not the same. They're actually quite different. Convertible bonds only convert to shares if the share price goes up quite a bit. And not only that, as far as the debt aspect of it goes, they're not paying any interest. And on top of that, virtually all, if not all of the debt that they've issued recently is all, like, we're talking, like, the expiries on those coupons is like 5 years from now. I don't know what the exact dates are, but I think it's roughly 5 years. So the brilliant aspect of this is the maturity for these bonds, most of it is not even until after the next halving cycle, right? The next halving cycle is going to be in 2028. So if they're issuing debt that is expiring in 2029, that means that we are one whole halving cycle away. And another important differentiation here is it's not that they can't be margin called, it's just the likelihood of them being margin called is a lot less than when you're using traditional debt. And the reason for that is the debt is spaced out at least once a year, right? So if Bitcoin goes way down, that doesn't matter. Like, the only way that they would be in serious trouble is they would have to miss at least one of those payments. So in other words, Bitcoin would have to go down like 80, 90% and stay down for at least a couple years. That could happen. Number one, if it does happen, it's overwhelmingly likely that it's for a short period of time. And number two, it's pretty unlikely that it happens. Like everybody in the Bitcoin space is predicting that Bitcoin is going to get less volatile over time. Is it ever going to be like stock market volatility? I think we're a long ways off of that. But it is going to get less volatile over time simply because there's going to be less coins available. And not only that, the MicroStrategies of the world, the ETFs of the world, they're not selling. Right? When you look at the big sell-offs, the whales always are net buyers. Like, almost always. When you look at the percentage of Bitcoin that hasn't moved in 3, 4, 5 years, that number is always over 50%. Usually it's like 70, 80%. So that's just my 2 cents. Anything obviously could happen. I could be wrong about all of this. As far as stocks go, I'd be really surprised if we see another year as good as this year. Like, really surprised, just because I think we've had such a good year that, and given the current valuations, I just think it's really hard to expect any really good returns this year. Bitcoin, I think is going to be its time to shine in 2025, simply because I think this year, Bitcoin easily outperformed the stock market. It was up over 100%, but even with its recent pullback. But on the flip side, Bitcoin is going to outperform, because traditionally it is that year after the halving that outperforms. It was 2021 that outperformed 2020 the last time. It was go back every single cycle. It's that year after that outperforms, and usually it's that first quarter that does like really good. Looking back, the first quarter usually does really good. The second quarter usually there's a pullback, and then the last 2 quarters is usually pretty positive. I think that's probably the most realistic scenario, right? Trump gets in. There's a lot of positive affirmations. That sends Bitcoin to a new all-time high. the hype behind that probably dies off a little, and again you get the usual, the weak hands sell to the strong hands, and then you go up the rest of the year. That's my prediction. But like I said, I could be wrong about everything, but I just wanted to throw all this stuff out here. So anyway, I've gone on long enough. If you liked the video, please like, subscribe, comment, all that good stuff, and stay tuned for more.